We're covering the breaking news tonight and closely monitoring escalating strikes across the Middle East as the United States says it's accelerating the military operation and will only strike deeper inside Iranian territory. Here in Washington, Senate Republicans tonight have struck down a resolution that would have demanded President Trump go to Congress to get approval for any future U.S. military action in Iran. Republican Senator Rand Paul voted with Democrats on this measure, and Democratic Senator John Fetterman joined Republicans to reject the war powers push. My next source was a co-sponsor of the resolution, Senator Adam Schiff of California. And thank you, Senator, for being here, because we talked to your fellow Democrat, Senator Chris Murphy, this week, who was warning his concern was that if this failed, this effort to restrict Trump's war power, that then the president would feel that he has Congress's support for what he's doing in Iran. Do you agree with him?
I understand the concern that Chris has, but no, I think there's a big difference between a war powers resolution meant to bring about an end to the conflict or require the president to come before Congress and seek an authorization and actually having a vote on an authorization, on a war powers authorization. So I think it's a very different kind of a vote, and we have to make that case to the American people. The Republicans really don't want to vote on a war authorization. They frankly didn't want to vote on the measure we put forward because they understand we are at war now with Iran. There's no mistaking it. The president calls it a war. So does his Secretary of Defense or Secretary of War and others in the cabinet. We've lost service members tragically, including one Californian. There's no doubt about this being war. And I think Republicans both don't want to own it themselves because they know this could go very badly. But at the same time, they're not willing, at least at this point, to stand up to the president. So I think it's incumbent on us to do everything we can and knowledgeable or knowing of the fact that the president may try to spin it as he will. But we're going to keep at this. We're going to keep holding their feet to the fire because, frankly, the president misled the country when he said he wouldn't embark on new wars of regime change. And there are the needs of millions and millions of Americans that are being ignored, and resources that could be used to help them afford their life are being squandered over Iran right now.
Your other colleague, Brian Schatz, said today that the war is costing $1 billion a day. He said in one effing month, we will spend more over there than we needed to save health care. Have you heard that estimate, that this is going to cost, or this is costing $1 billion a day, Senator?
I have heard that estimate. I don't know that I can corroborate at this point, but we're undoubtedly spending a fortune every day on this. And if you add up what we're spending already on this Iran war, and you add it to our military efforts in Venezuela, and you add it to the first Iran war, which administration officials have now taken to calling the 12 Days War, it is billions and billions of dollars. That means no more hospitals that could have been built with that money, no more schools that could have been built with that money, no more investment in American people that could have been made with that money. There's a real cost here. The most important cost, of course, is the loss of 6 American lives, 6 American service members. But we're also spending away the savings of the American people, vast amounts of taxpayer dollars, in a way the president promised he wouldn't, and that the American people don't support.
When the president was asked about this today, when he was at an economic event, he said, I have to leave because I'm monitoring the war. I've got to go check on the war. Why do you think there are Republicans on Capitol Hill who are still hesitant to call it a war?
Because I think they recognize that the moment they do call it a war, they're acknowledging their unwillingness to do their constitutional duty, because only Congress has the power to declare war. And it's not just about the declaration itself or the name that's given. Far more important, the founders gave us the power to essentially make war. And yes, the president directs that war, but not without the approval of Congress. So the minute they acknowledge that is the same minute they've acknowledged that they have really fallen down on the job. One of the most important responsibilities, along with the power of purse, they're simply abdicating to this president. If under these circumstances where we've lost service members, where we're mounting one of the largest military campaigns in decades, they still don't think it requires a vote in Congress, they're essentially saying to this president and any future president that they can make war wherever they want, whenever they want, however they want, and Congress will not disturb them. And that is a really dangerous proposition for the country. The founders understood that. They didn't want to put that much power in an executive that they feared would grow too fond of war. And if there's anything we've seen over the last year, it's that this president has grown very fond of war.
Your governor, Gavin Newsom, made a comment, obviously, about Israel. This has been in coordination with Israel, as the White House has been talking about how they did this with them. About the prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, I want you to listen to what Governor Newsom said.
But the issue of Bibi is interesting because he's got his own domestic issues. He's trying to stay out of jail. He's got an election coming up. He's potentially on the ropes. He's got folks, the hard line, that want to annex the West Bank. I mean, Freeman and others are talking about it appropriately, sort of an apartheid state.
Do you think, looking down the road, that the United States should consider maybe, rethinking our military support for Israel?
It breaks my heart because the current leadership in Israel is walking us down that path, where I don't think you have a choice but that consideration.
Do you agree with Governor Newsom?
Well, I agree with some of the characterization of Netanyahu. I don't agree more broadly with those comments in this sense. First of all, I was glad, frankly, the president corrected the record that his Secretary of State was making when Rubio was trying to claim that we went to war because Israel was going to go to war and therefore we had to go to war because Iran would respond by attacking us. The president said no. If anything, he forced Israel's hand. I'm glad we're not blaming Israel for our own decisions because that's a cop-out, among other things. Israel is going to act in what Israel believes is its defense and its national security interests. I don't agree with Netanyahu about the policies of that government at all. I think they're making Israel a lot less safe. But that's a decision for Israel to make. It's our decision what we believe is in the national security interest of the United States. And I do not believe it was in our national security interest to go to war with Iran. So I strongly disagree with anyone taking responsibility for this but ourselves. But I do concur that, the talk about annexing the West Bank, and I led a broadly supported Democratic letter in opposition to that idea. Netanyahu's own policies and problems and legal problems at home. A lot of the actions of the Netanyahu government, I think, have been deeply counterproductive. But they make their own national security decisions, and we cannot essentially either delegate our national security to Israel, nor can we blame Israel for the actions we take. We make them ourselves, and we got to hold ourselves accountable for them.
Senator Adam Schiff, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.